Thank you so much to everyone for taking some time to join us this morning for the first of our winter festival and events learning series. I think you're going to have a lot to listen to and learn this morning from our guest speaker. And I think working with local businesses to form partnerships is something that kind of affects all of us in one way or another through our work when we're talking about festivals and events. So I think this morning's session is going to be great. We're very excited here at GMIST to be continuing our partnership with Festivals and Events Ontario to bring these webinars to you. And we're looking forward to this morning. So I'm going to turn it over right away to Debbie Mann with Festivals and Events Ontario, and she's going to be our host for this morning. Over to you, Debbie.
Thanks, Nora, and hello, everyone, on this cold and blistery day, wherever you are. I'm pleased to welcome Lisa La Rocca from Supercrawl, and the company I think is called Sonic Union, right, Lisa? And you run Supercrawl.
Sonic Onion. Yeah.
Sonic Kenya. Okay. And so Lisa has just a bit of a background. Lisa's been a member of ours of Festivals and Events Ontario for quite a few years and has done a number of presentations at our upcoming conference in like 3 days. We're excited to have her here and present to you her knowledge and expertise and fun in this industry. So Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, so we said I'm going to be presenting this at the FEO conference next week. So this is kind of my test for how long the presentation is as well. So I'm hoping to leave a lot of time for questions at the end. I'm kind of going over quite a bit broadly, and if you need any more specific information about any of the pieces, feel free to ask
Can
at
I
any
just,
point
sorry,
or at the
Lisa,
end. Yeah.
sorry, Lisa, sorry to interrupt you. If you have any questions, feel free to put it into the chat or raise your hand and Lisa will answer them. I will read the questions to her so she doesn't have to worry about it. But if you want to have a chat with her, feel free to do that. And sorry, I forgot to mention this. There's a poll at the end of this. A survey, if you could take a few minutes at the end of this just to answer the survey for us. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Just before I do that, I don't know if I can see a show of hands, but has anybody here been to Supercrawl before? I know you're not local, not Ontario. Have we heard of Supercrawl? Okay, some people have, some people haven't. Okay, so I'll describe the festival a little bit more than I would for my Ontario friends before we kind of get into it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can we see the presentation up? We can see the presentation. Okay, I've always been awful at PowerPoint, so my presentation's quite simple, but I try to include a lot of photos so that everyone can kind of get an idea of the festival. Okay, so Supercrawl is a 3-day music and arts street festival in downtown Hamilton. Last year, our estimated attendance was 285,000 over the 3 days. So we get quite a few people, between 85 and 100,000 a day usually. The economic impact is estimated by the province of Ontario's tool at 35 million last year. So it's quite a large festival. We have kind of every artistic discipline that we can imagine hosting. So we have 2 large music stages. There's usually 10 to 12 large-scale art installations on the street, a fashion runway that shows fashion shows all weekend for local designers, theater performances on the street, dance performances, a literary tent with spoken word and literary readings, a family zone, on-street sports, which last year included basketball, wrestling, and skateboarding, among other things. 150 craft vendors, 40 food trucks, large-scale performance like the photo here, and all kinds of other things. So we really try to include as much as we can within the space that we have. At the festival. Okay, so this is just an idea of what our map looks like. So the festival is over 2 kilometers of street closure. That's more than 20 city blocks. The top map that you see is our kind of graphic visual map that goes out to the public, that kind of identifies where key things are. The bottom map is our planning map, much more detailed. It's got, every single tent, every activation, every art piece, kind of like labeled there, and every piece of fencing. So that's our very like detailed planning map that usually doesn't go out publicly, but that we use and all of our logistics suppliers and everything would use. So it's for such a large festival to look at the top map and see how simplified it kind of becomes in there. But once you start putting things on, it can get too messy. So that's kind of what we've narrowed it down to. Okay, so today, I'm going to try to cover these things as best as I can. Like I said, ask any questions. I'm going to timer at the end if you'd like. But we're going to go over opportunities for partnership with local businesses during street festival planning, logistical issues and challenges that may arise while planning a street festival or an urban event, and how to problem solve them. So most of this will be with business. I've added a little bit in just street festivals in general, because I think a lot of people find it really interesting, and there's a lot of learnings, we've had over the years. And then unique aspects and considerations of street festivals and urban events compared to other types of events. So, for years, so Supercrawl's been around for 17 years. I've been with the festival for 16 of those 17 years. Obviously, it's grown. So the first year, they had 3,000 people was the estimate. So it's grown very quickly over the first decade. It grew quite substantially. Where was I going with that? Oh, we've learned a lot of things. So on the street, I always wish, I'm like, if we were just in a park, we would not have a lot of the issues that we have on a street with spacing, with, dealing with businesses on the street, all of the different unique things that come with working actually in an urban environment. And then during COVID, we moved the festival into a park, and we had the rainiest weekend ever, and everything sunk about 10 feet into the ground, into the mud. And then I wish we were back on a street. So every kind of location that you're going to use for a festival is going to have its unique challenges. Luckily, over the years, we've learned enough about the location that Supercrawl's on that we're comfortable with it now, but it definitely takes, learning every year to kind of get that under your belt. And I'm sure people that are used to festivals and parks would have handled the mud a lot differently than we did that year, but it was mud crawl, as we like to call it. Okay, so I'm gonna start at the most simple piece of this. Obviously, when you're planning an event, notifying your community. So we've added a couple things to our business letters that are required by the city. So since we're closing a road, our city requires us to send out business letters to notify the business and then the residents, the community, that the street is being closed. These can be very simple. So just the road closure, the roads that are being closed, and the times that it's being closed. But we've added a couple things, and we do this more than once now. So we were finding when we only do it once, sometimes the information would change. We'd have new information. People wouldn't receive the first letter. We want to make sure they get the information. So we do it a minimum of 3 times prior to the festival in the 6 months leading up to the festival. And at least 2 letters to the residents in the community surrounding the street closure as well. So again, the letter details which streets are closed, the festival times, kind of the general planning. But we also include information on how the businesses can participate in this letter. So I'm going to go into that, but it lays out all of the different ways they can participate and how to communicate with us if they want to participate. And we found that we are within the community, we are on the street that the festival takes place. Our business is very accessible to anybody that is within the Supercrawl closure. However, a lot of times people say, they didn't know how to contact us. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know how to get the information. So we're getting more and more clear about how to do that and where we are and the different ways they can get in touch with us. Because we just want to make sure that anyone that does want to get in touch with us can. We started requesting that the businesses sign a sheet when they receive the letter, because we also noticed, it's very easy to claim that you didn't get the information. We can't verify whether they did or not. And it's possible that a business could be missed on our trips as well. So if we have the businesses sign on delivery, if there's feedback afterwards, we can go back to that list and see if they were missed or not. And if they were, we can apologize and kind of try to rectify the situation. But at least that gives us some assurance so we can kind of check up on what happened when we were putting our information out. Every year on the street, there's going to be new businesses. There's a lot of business turnover. That's always going to be a surprise to them and you. They have never operated within your festival if you're, operating on the same street with the same businesses every year. So we've had a lot of surprises, people doing things that they didn't know that they weren't able to do. So we really try now to communicate, identify those businesses first. So we keep a business list that's updated every year to identify the new businesses on the street. And there's hundreds of them. So there, is always a handful at least. And then, we make sure we communicate with them, make sure they get the information and try to really mitigate any issues that could happen on either side with people that have never participated before or seen this weekend kind of go down. And then the last note there, any change you make in the festival is going to impact someone. So you get a new sponsor, you think putting up their activation is no big deal. It ends up going in front of a business, or it ends up conflicting with a business on the street or something. You move, your stage over 10 feet and now it's blocking someone's entrance. Every change you make year to year, and there's going to be changes year to year, is going to impact somebody. So I'll go into a little bit on how we gather feedback and integrate it into future events. But just knowing that kind of like the butterfly effect, if you move something over an inch, it's going to affect somebody different. And sometimes you make a change to make one business happy, to take their feedback into consideration, and instead you end up upsetting somebody else. So that's always going to happen. But just trying to be aware, and the more you do it, the more you can kind of foresee those things happening. Okay. So the first way that we allow businesses to participate is our on-street table program. So we were getting a lot of feedback at the beginning that, businesses didn't want to have to pay to participate. They're on the street all year. They have active businesses. They are a draw for the street as well. So with space considerations also in play, we started the table program. So all businesses on the street are allowed to put out one free table outside their establishment. As you can see, there's a couple examples there. So they're just not allowed to block sidewalk flow. It should be flush up against their business, but they can sell what they normally sell in their stores. We found the first couple of years, people would actually show us receipts, like they were selling it to or subletting it to other vendors and other participants. So that's now very clearly laid out that they can't, that it's meant for them and it's meant for a program to help the businesses on the street. They shouldn't be selling it to another business or another vendor. We don't allow food outside. So if they're a restaurant, they can't sell food outside, but they can, promote or take orders and get people to come in. And we ask them on that letter to notify us if they're going to do this. It does still have an impact to sidewalk flow and movement of people. So we just like to know which businesses are going to do this. We don't hear from all of them, but if we can gather most of them, we can at least plan for that a little bit within the festival plan. Okay, so other ways that are initially laid out for businesses that they can participate. So in the top right here is an extended patio that a coffee shop called Mulberry within our festival does every year. So they do quite a bit now. They do like a full beer garden, they do food in there, they have a little stage, and they sponsor the festival as part of coming out onto the street and expanding their patio there. In the bottom left, Architect Hair Design came to us. So the bottom left and bottom right are two examples of businesses that wanted to contribute to programming, which is something that's hard to do because we curate all of our programming very carefully, and you want to know what is being showcased at your festival. So we worked with these two businesses. So the bottom left, Architect Hair Design, wanted to do a pop-up concert on their roof. They do it some other times throughout the year, and we worked with them with the stage schedule so that their music was not conflicting with the stage. So it's not going on at the same time. They have communication with the stage manager at that end, and anything that goes on there goes in between our acts on the stage. The bottom right, we have a skateboarding shop on the street, and they last year wanted to do a skateboarding competition that they hold every year in another park. They wanted to bring it to Supercrawl. So that was part of the setup there. So they actually had like an active skateboard competition happen on the street for the whole weekend. It was really cool. It was definitely a big draw. Definitely a different logistical item than we had ever kind of had as far as, safety, insurance, fencing, getting that all set up. But working with the business and bringing them in very early with almost, a full, 12 months of planning, they were able to assist us with this and, provide another programming piece for the festival. Okay, when businesses are involved by default. So if you're doing a street festival or anywhere with active businesses, some businesses do have, outdoor setups that impact the street, sidewalk. In Hamilton, we have a really great parking space patio program that goes from May to October. So Supercrawl is in September. So any of the parking space patios that have been set up are active during Supercrawl. At the beginning, this was really hard for us to kind of work with because they could pop up at any time. They didn't have a deadline. So someone could apply to have a patio like the weekend before, just kind of pop it up. And, we've planned things for the entire layout. So it's hard to have something pop up with a couple of days notice when you've mapped out your whole festival. So we've worked with the city on the deadlines and on the notification of which businesses have applied for patios. So we're aware, we can map it into our mapping. You'll see two examples here. So Architect, again, they have a on-street patio, and 5 Star on the left, they have like a sidewalk designated patio that actually operates all year round. So that's kind of like their patio. And a couple things with this, we have license areas within the festival. It being an open access free street festival, we can't license and fence in the entire thing. So working with our AGCO, our liquor organization as well in Ontario, we've worked with them in communication with these businesses to make sure that our insurance and everything that we're doing in the festival is upheld. They have proper security or proper staffing, so beers aren't passed over that very small, rope or fencing. That does become a problem when you get that many people on the street. Our beer gardens are all double fenced and very secured. So really working with these businesses again and, making sure everybody's happy. We didn't want to just come and inflict rules on businesses that again are there all year, that may have these patios all year or a large portion of the year. We didn't want to come and have to change what they're used to doing. But kind of the thing we like to communicate to businesses is we expect them to operate the same way during Supercrawl unless they've communicated to us. So if they usually have a patio, then we assume that they will have a patio. They're going to put up a special temporary patio during Supercrawl, which has happened without us knowing, that's when they should get in touch with us. We expect them to operate as normal, however they would the other weekends of the year. Anything else should kind of be, we should be notified about. One thing with this that we have run into, so you'll see the Coors Light umbrella in the bottom left. With a festival, with sponsors, you'll have sponsors that ask for exclusivity. They might have, you know, signage or their own sponsors or their own things like umbrellas and tents from other companies. If these are, again, things that they normally have, so they're not getting sponsors just for our weekend and popping things up, we do communicate with our sponsors and just let them know, you know, we're on an active open street. There are things that already exist within the street. We're not going to ask them to take something like that down. But if it pops up just the weekend of, and it's obviously they've sold sponsorship knowing that lots of people are coming, then we will obviously approach them about that. But that is something to think about when you're talking to sponsors as well, because we have had that brought up by our sponsors as something that they maybe were not happy about, but at least were questioning why there was other branding at the festival. Okay, so just a marketing piece that I wanted to show that we do as well. So like I said, there's hundreds. I think there's somewhere between 200 and 300 active like businesses, restaurants, art galleries in our closure. So we've started doing this. We advertise all of our vendors that are on street at Supercrawl. So, you know, we kind of thought just out of fairness and out of, you know, respect to the businesses that are on the street, that we would provide a full listing and links to their businesses as well. We already, like I said, keep the updated business list for our communications and our letters. So this was a little bit easy. Like we had a good start to get up on our website. So, and we heard a lot from, you know, especially restaurants when you're bringing food trucks in and vendors and there's similar products to what shops sell, that they wanted to be promoted as well. So this is one of the things we do. Then we can like kind of top this up with some social media, get some photos during the weekend of the businesses as well, and kind of promote the on-street businesses with our vendors and anything that we're bringing in for the festival. So if you go on our website, you can see these full lists, but like I said, there's hundreds, there's their location and a link to their business is there as well. Okay, food trucks and restaurants. This is something I've heard not just with Supercrawl, but with any festival we've ever done, especially on a street. Once you put food trucks on the street, if usually when the festival isn't extremely busy as well, you're going to hear complaints from restaurants about their sales, about people going into the restaurants because you've put additional food available on the street. We've done a few things to help mitigate that. Also, luckily, we've gotten busy enough that, you know, the restaurants are also busy and there's not, they couldn't possibly serve food to as many people that come. So we have had to supplement. I think at the smaller size, you really have to be careful with how many food vendors you're bringing in and what they're serving. If you already have a shawarma restaurant, like right within your festival, I wouldn't bring 2 shawarma trucks and put them across the street. Like that's not working well with your businesses as well. So, and you will hear about that for sure. So what we've done, we've kind of gotten everything down to 2 food areas. Luckily, they are away from the majority of the restaurants on the street. On the left there, we have a big mall in Hamilton right now is closed. It's supposed to be under construction at some point. We don't know when. But we have this big mall, so it's basically just a long empty wall down the street where there's no active businesses. There's no restaurants. There's like nobody to block. So we try to put the line of food trucks that we can there. We don't allow generators to be on. So we run our own generators, but we put them in specific places and we plug all of our food trucks in for the entire weekend. That way, anybody walking on either side of these food trucks, or if there are some that happen to be closer to businesses, they're not affected by generator noise or smell or any of that, which is a common complaint we get when there is a generator running near a business. You'll see on the right side, you'll see a food truck far down there, but with any active businesses, we've left a gap so that there's they can operate, there's an entrance to their business, they're not blocked by a wall of food trucks. So yeah, sometimes we lose some spots that we could have food trucks in, but it's just really just keeps a better relationship with the businesses on the street as well. And when we weren't this busy, and we were hearing, complaints from restaurants that we were bringing food trucks in, we tried to do a couple things. One of them was the volunteer meal program, that we also give to artists sometimes as well. But we give them a coupon. We get restaurants that are interested on the street to be part of this program. We give all the volunteers $10 per shift that they can use at these restaurants. And then we compensate the restaurant the full $10. So they're not donating anything. They're not giving us anything. Instead of feeding the volunteers and paying to feed the volunteers, we provide the coupons they can use at the businesses and the restaurants on the street. And then they generate a little bit of income. Definitely helped a lot more when the festival was smaller. Now they're too busy. A lot of them almost don't want to participate because they're too busy serving customers anyways. They can't also incorporate, these coupons in. But it helped a lot when, $500 or $1,000 to their weekend, really pumped up their sales. So just a couple more photos of the food truck setup. And now craft and tented vendors. So this is probably the most active complaint that we get from businesses, or at least was. Same thing as the food trucks. When you have vendors, like commonly they're on both sides of the street or on up against the curb in a big wall of tents. And that our businesses are always asking for us not to have the tents in front of their shops. It's blocking view to their shop. It's blocking access. People just go straight down the middle of the street and don't walk on the two sides and check out the businesses as well. Something we were able to do, considering as well that we always need an emergency lane in the festival, so we always need a full lane that's accessible to emergency vehicles. Something we were able to do was put the tents in the middle lanes back to back facing out, so they're facing the businesses. So people are walking on either side of the street. They'll often do a loop all the way around. I'll show you a couple more photos, but they're facing the businesses, so people walking through aren't blocked. The view of the business isn't blocked at all. If a vendor does want one of these tents and does want to rent a vendor tent, we offer them the spot closest to their shop if they would like it. Knowing how much maps change once you actually get on site, I physically go through every single tent and move the signs and make sure they're getting the one exactly in front of their shop. Because if it moves over 10 feet and they're not like direct pointability to their shop, they often get upset. So, and I'll get calls as the tents are being set up that their tent has shifted a couple feet. So I'll go around and make sure I switch them around so that the tent they ended up with is the one in front of their shop. It's usually very important to them. And we put that extra effort in again to help the businesses and make sure they're happy and make sure we're working with them on what they want. So it is a little tedious, but I think it's worth it, to make sure they feel heard and to make sure they're participating how they want to in the festival. You still will always get complaints. I put a sad face there, but in our layout, there's some streets that are not wide enough to put the tents in the middle, or some kind of activation or something will come in that's bigger. And again, things change year to year. Maybe one year a business feels like they're slightly blocked by something. Again, we just try to get feedback and change it the next year, but you're still always going to get complaints no matter what. You know, you might accidentally put somebody who's selling candles across the street from a candle shop because you didn't realize they were also going to have candles in their booth. So it's kind of just about checking in with those businesses. If you hear from your volunteers or your other setup staff or anything that you're getting complaints, you know, go and talk to them and then try to make a change for the next year. So this is just some more photos of how the tent setup is. So you can see just them empty on the left, and then just another view of people, but they're in the middle lanes. They're back to back. We put a tarp in between to separate the tents back to back. It's worked quite well for us. And weighting them down as well. This works because they're in blocks of 6s. And it works like 2 by 3, and it works very well because now they're a block of tents instead of just like a single row. So we found with any weather or wind that we've had, this actually also kind of helps with that. There's another view, so you can see that there's businesses on the side as well, and you'll see the tarps there in between the tents that kind of divide the backs of their tents. This is just another example of, so this was like a large art piece that we had. Again, it's in the middle lane. We found when we did this type of thing and they were against the curb, the business isn't like, wow, that's beautiful art. They're just kind of like, this is blocking my shop. Why is my shop blocked? And everybody else kind of has full view. So we put this in the middle of the lane. People can walk on both sides. No businesses are completely blocked by it. And then this is just another example of keeping that emergency lane open. So this is our fashion tent. We've got a full emergency lane, even though it's quite a large tent setup. And again, it's in the middle lane. So we really like to use the middle now. When we first started, everything was on the sides. Okay, so a couple like logistical things. Road closures. Which are not the funnest part of kind of setting up a festival. Checking how much time I have. Okay. So obviously when you're communicating to businesses, be clear with the timing, be clear with what streets are closed, what they have access to. A lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants have deliveries that are regularly scheduled. There will be some panic. We allow deliveries before the festival. So the festival starts at 12 p.m. every day. We allow deliveries to their stores, but they do have to, we have staff and or security at every street opening. So they do have to let us know, and we'll let their delivery come in, drive slowly around everything, deliver. You know, we have some flower shops. Our festivals on a weekend, they might have a wedding that weekend. They have to load up a full truck of flowers. They're not going to carry them 2 blocks to the closest place they can park their car. So really, again, it's making sure they communicate with us so that we can help facilitate that versus, you know, a bunch of panic when something arrives and can't get into the street closure, and we don't want that. Businesses and their customers will move the sawhorses that you put to close the roads. This is my biggest safety concern every year at the festival when you're closing a street. People don't understand how much of a safety risk it is to just drive onto that street anyways. People setting things up don't think, or even just the public walking on the street that's closed, don't expect vehicles to be driving on it, obviously. So people will come through, and then for some reason they think the faster they drive, the faster they'll get out of our street closure. So, you know, they're speeding through. I've almost been hit. I know a lot of our, you know, staff and volunteers, it's really something that we brief with everybody to be really careful. The best thing that we could do to help that is, first of all, make sure the businesses are heard for deliveries and all of that so they don't move the sawhorses themselves. We've stationed security and staff we have, you know, more than 20 openings, but as many are the most popular street closures that we can. And then getting as many big items set up that we can when we can. So the large tents, trucks, stages. We try to get those set up as quickly as possible because once there's, a 20 by 80 tent, they're less likely to try to speed down the street. Or if they see a stage at the end of the street, they know that they're gonna, encounter somebody there. So that is the best help. Anytime we've had, a street that nothing ends up getting on for a while, it just becomes kind of like a speedway and very dangerous. And we have to kind of employ more security there to make sure that people aren't speeding down it. Okay. Oh, and then the last note there as well, make sure your security staff, volunteers, anybody are equipped with the knowledge with who is able to access the street or who to contact if somebody's trying to access the street and they're not sure if they should let their vehicle on. A lot of unnecessary arguments happen if, I've approved that delivery to happen or that truck to come in, and then somebody who's doing their job properly is telling them that they're not allowed to access the street. So just making sure that they're aware of who should be accessing the street, who's got pre-approval, or who to contact just to give them a quick call and say, this business says they're supposed to be able to drive onto the street. Is that true? I wanted to go quickly into vehicle mitigation equipment. This is something we used to use. The cost, unfortunately, even for a large festival like us, is prohibitive. We are not able currently to employ these. Obviously, they are a great product to have on site. If anyone here is with a municipality, it really helps when the municipality has access or has some kind of, help with acquiring these because they're very, very expensive and add, quite a bit to the budget, but are an important safety piece. We've kind of supplemented that with fencing across the street. So we don't just use the sawhorses. Fencing comes, we have a swing gate in the middle of the fencing that an emergency vehicle could come through if they needed to. And on our main busiest streets, we have a police car stationed as well. So the police cars there, they could move it. We had to get an emergency vehicle in because you're always like trying to lock down the street for safety reasons, but also trying to mitigate if you need emergency vehicle access and leaving enough space for an emergency vehicle. So we use police cars as well in those busiest sections. You'll see the fencing across the street at the bottom there. And this was a large art installation that we had that actually closed a lane of a street that's normally open as well, but helped kind of with traffic flow as well with vehicles because they were on those really large lifts. A couple other things, obviously have a great, emergency plan and security plan for the festival. This will help your businesses as well. If there's somebody that they can, whether it's a volunteer, security, police, whoever, that they can quickly approach if they have an issue. And then those people also know how to get in touch with kind of festival organizers if they had to. But yeah, just visibility, your volunteers in t-shirts, security in some kind of security outfit really just makes the businesses feel more comfortable as well. And, we love getting the feedback as we go year after year that, it was the best year for if they needed help and they could always find somebody and there were people around. So that's really important. You don't want something happening outside of someone's business and they don't know who to call. There's nobody around to see it and help them. And so we really tried to amp that up as much as we could. And then the last piece here, I actually did a event safety program where I calculated the full event capacity and emergency evacuation for the street, for the whole enclosure. That was I won't get into that. It was a very detailed endeavor, but if you ever have an event this big that is worth doing, how many people could actually fit in the space, and you have a good plan for what would happen if you had to evacuate. And you can also communicate that to your businesses, vendors, etc. Okay, I'm going to go through some of this stuff a little bit quickly so we can have questions, but electrical, you'll see an electrical disaster on the right. On a street in an urban event, there's not usually electrical available. You have to bring it all in. People sometimes think electrical can just drop from the sky. I don't know where they think it comes from, but with businesses and running, we run all of the power. We don't allow anyone to run their own power for insurance and safety. We've also had permanent electrical boxes installed in a couple areas on power poles throughout the festival so that we can draw from there. Okay, a couple unique aspects of our festival. So buskers, we welcome buskers. We don't allow them to be amplified, so no amps, nothing that can like carry sound far, but acoustic buskers we allow anywhere within the festival as long as they're not blocking a business. Parking is always a thing to consider for businesses and if you have people living within the festival closure. And then rogue vendors, I don't know if this is unique to our festival, but since we're on an open street, we have people. So you see on the right, somebody has just found this area that we don't have anything set up in, and they've started to set up their own vendor tent. We've had, our insurance threaten to pull insurance if we have, because there's hundreds of these. It's quite a task for us to shut these down all weekend, and quite hard. It's fights all weekend for us. But we at one time had hundreds of these setting up in random spots throughout the festival. And it became a problem. And yeah, we had our insurance have a big problem with it as well, because we don't know who these people are, what they're selling, but they're part of the festival. So one thing we did to kind of help with that is we have a supermarket now. So this is a free area people can set up. If anyone does set up somewhere within the festival, we just tell them that they can go there and set up for free. And we try to keep them in this one field that we've rented. Weather. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but obviously weather happens. When we've had really bad weather, businesses sometimes are actually happier because people are going into businesses and restaurants a little more. The mall that is within the festival, a lot more people went into the mall during the worst of the rain that year, and they were happy to see people inside as well. So it's not always the worst as far as like business relationships. But obviously you have to have a really good weather plan, and it should be shared with everybody involved in the festival, right down to the businesses if you can, what happens in case of weather, what happens in case of like event postponement or cancellation, and who's making that decision and how is it getting out to everybody. So crowds. With businesses specifically, we found when it gets too busy, we have like the opposite complaints from businesses. So it's too busy. Do they have to hire extra security because there's so many people in their shop, they can't kind of keep track of people possibly stealing or coming in and out or damaging things that they have. So we have had that other end of the complaint when we've had, the really large crowds. Some businesses, when it gets really busy towards like the end of the evening, when people are kind of there more for the concert and the headlining acts, they close because people have stopped kind of wanting to shop and talk about their business at that point. And then I put a note there about counting attendance. So obviously we're a free open access event. We use a number of things to count attendance, including the plan that I made. So I know how many people can fit in our stage area in all of the areas of the festival. So depending on how dense it is, we can kind of do a calculation hourly of how many people were there. We've also used aerial photography, and our police have had event experts that can do an estimate for us as well, and a number of other things. But it's really about kind of getting a number of calculations and making sure they all are accurate the more data you have. A couple more photos of crowds, so how busy we get. Permanent and legacy art for the community. So these are two large murals that we change every Supercrawl. They're on sides of buildings. They're very large. and they stay up all year. So these are kind of pieces that are art pieces for Supercrawl, but are kind of, you know, making the community more beautiful for the rest of the year as well. So these are really important pieces to us, and we've had great feedback about doing this as well. I won't go into this. Again, you'll see the street closure is a disaster here. Same thing with setup, dangers of tear down when things start being removed from the street and the street's more open and vehicles can drive on it and it can get quite scary. And then just a couple, cool things we've been able to do with an urban festival on the street. So this was the basketball activation last year. This was wrestling. On the right, a large-scale theater performance in a bubble with a mime. And then on the left, that's our fashion runway. There's a drag performance on it in that photo. These were, this was a squonk performance, the company's called, but two large purple hands that they were able to move. It was really cool, something I think probably could only be done outdoors just because of the height and the space required. This is a large art installation that we had again in two big, shipping containers. Again, something that you would need to be outside and possibly in an urban environment to do. And then this is a large circus performance with fireworks that was on a crane over the festival. And then final thoughts. So you can't please everybody. I think I went over this quite a few times, but you can definitely try. Every year you're going to have, no matter how many years you do it, completely different things pop up and different people upset and new people upset. We do business surveys after the festival where we go to, the entire street, gather their feedback. We usually send a third party, so it's not me or any of the direct organizers doing it. It's somebody they feel like is neutral and they're anonymous. But we can gather feedback to make improvements the next year. And I think that's the most important thing, is not having people upset about the same thing every year if you can fix it, and keeping good communication with them. And, we repair those relationships every year, I think, when we fix the thing they were upset about the year before. And yeah, make sure the businesses feel heard, involved, and supported. If they want to get involved in any way, we usually try to allow them to, if we can. It's not just like us doing something. They are active businesses in the street and they're there all year. And yeah, we think it's really important. Okay, I sped through the end a little bit, but I think we have 9 or 10 minutes for questions. So
Sure. There's a couple in chat. One is, do you provide vendor tents or do the vendors bring them?
we provide them all now. Our vendor program it kind of just breaks itself even. Like, we've calculated the vendor fee for arts vendors only. So we're not there's no commercial vendors going into these tents, but we've kind of just calculated the cost of the tents so that we can set them all up. They're all, they're all the same. They're all set up in the exact right spot. A foot of difference at this festival really messes up the rest of the plan. So it's easier and it looks nice too. And we light them all as well. So we provide the lights and string them.
Okay, so you provide everything and it's all included in their fee for renting the tent.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, do you use let me, before I go on to that, Kelly, does that answer your question? Can you stop sharing, Lisa, so that we can see there? Thank you. Does that answer your question, Kelly? Okay, great. Thank you. Do you use Environics or have an attendance tracking software? That's from Laura, City of Oshawa.
We don't. We have looked into it. The cost is usually prohibitive for us. But yeah, we currently don't. I have every year looked into it in quite some detail. I hope to do something like that one year.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have any questions? Or how do you deal with the businesses that is right in the thick of the event that doesn't want to be a part of the event in any way? Or do you find that it doesn't happen? I'm going to say no to the other one. To the last one, yeah, it probably does happen.
Oh yeah, it definitely happens. I mean, and depending on the type of the business, having a large festival I think you could always find some opportunity to integrate yourself, but certain types of businesses, some that, have appointments, like a hair salon or something, might not think that having, hundreds of people are gonna go through their business during the weekend. Um, we definitely do. The longer we've been around, with the business turnover and with people just kind of getting used to the fact that it's going to happen, has helped that a little bit. But also, keeping our timelines and our road closure times and everything consistent once we found what we wanted it to be, I think helped, because even if they hate it, they know it's going to happen those 3 days, and they kind of deal with it, or they close and go on vacation sometimes.
Does that answer your question, Carolyn? Okay, great. Tim has one. Is if there's oh no, just a minute. Clarissa, some tips, tricks, ideas, struggles, RE food trucks. It seems to be a bit of a struggle here, and apparently counselors, members of the community are completely against it. Would like to know of some positive ways to approach it or to sweet talk into supporting.
Yeah, we have a strong like food truck culture here in Hamilton. I think we were one of the first cities, at least around here, to like really adopt it and get a lot of really strong food trucks going. But it really starts, yeah, with like the municipal regulations. So right now for us, food trucks have to be licensed in Hamilton to come to our event. So that is like a little bit of a deterrent for some of our non-local trucks. But also, I think smaller events, and I know there have been events locally that have been canceled or like completely not happened because they've had so many complaints about food trucks being present. I think it really starts with the food trucks. Again, like we had some really strong chefs in Hamilton starting those businesses and really standing up for, what they were and the kind of regulations around them in our city. And I think uh, that was the main point that helped integrate them more into everything in Hamilton.
So it's just a matter of building a relationship with them over time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Who is that? Tim, does that answer your question? Okay. Uh, Ananopolis Royal Prides asks, what are your biggest growing pains, lessons learned? What's your staffing, permanent, full-time, part-time, and temp?
Okay. Biggest lessons learned and like over time, things that have happened, I think, I mean, we grew very quickly, so there were a lot of growing pains in those couple years when we went from like 3,000 to 20,000 to 50,000 or whatever the growth kind of was there over the first few years. Um, Definitely a lot of things around safety. And like I said, I did that course specifically to make sure we're managing the crowds. A lot of things around business relationships. So that's why we do more letters now. We do the surveys at the end. And when you're going to do something for the first time or the first couple of times, when we were growing and we were adding new streets, you have a lot of people coming out and yelling at you because they don't really understand maybe what you're doing or what the goal is or why it's going to help them, or why they can't get their vehicle in or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think we had to learn. I had to get a bit of a tougher skin, definitely, but we also had to learn kind of how to deal with all of those issues in a more proactive way and in a relationship building way versus yelling back or breaking down those relationships further. So I think that took a lot of learning for all of us to kind of learn how to address those issues and eventually make them happier, even if they're not completely happy, versus the opposite. You want the businesses on your side as much as you can.
Yeah.
And
And what
staffing.
about staffing? Yeah.
Now, so we are a record label, artist management company, festival company, and we have 3 venues as well, 2 in Hamilton, 1 in Guelph. So that whole company, our full-time staff is 10 people.
Okay.
So that includes 2 full-time venue managers, a label manager that aren't involved in events at all and a venue booker. So I would say our event team is, 4 to 5 people, kind of really 2 of us working on it.
How many volunteers, Lisa?
150 to 200 on the weekend. We've also hired a lot more like weekend staff as we've grown because we found, especially on bad weather weekends, but can't always rely on volunteers. There also are some jobs that we don't feel right asking them to do. So we've kind of amped up those staff that come in just for the weekend to help with some things. And obviously bartenders are always paid like those kind of staff as well.
Right, right. Have you engaged Indigenous communities in the area within the context of the festival? If so, what has been the response?
Yeah, every year in programming in different things in art installations, we've had fashion presentations on the fashion stage, music performances in music. We really try, with the Indigenous population, but with everybody in our community to get as many not only artistic disciplines, but as many communities, as many people involved in the festival as we can. We have over 250 artists and performers a year that participate. So yeah, we've done a lot of really cool things. It's been very well received by the audience. The fashion show specifically that we had, they worked with elders in their community, made pieces, walked the runway. And it was just a really special, I kind of organized the fashion zone as well, but it was a really special piece, I think, for everybody that was at that show specifically. And we just try to do things every year. The Hamilton Regional Indian Center is always in our family zone with quite a large activation, interacting with the families that come in there, and they always have a different like button making or a different kind of workshop they're doing. So yeah, we try to get everybody as involved as we can.
Okay. So it's 11 o'clock. If you have a few extra minutes, Lisa, there's a couple of more questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyone who can stay, please do. Are you okay, Nora, to stay a few extra minutes? Okay, good. Um, I had the pleasure, Ray Gracewood said, I had the pleasure of attending Supercrawl last year. What an amazing event. I'm curious about Teardown, which I assume is a massive undertaking. Are artists responsible to dispose of their installations? Or what kind of role does Supercrawl play in placing them, keeping them, and disposing them?
Yes. Okay. First, before people leave, I will be in Newfoundland in May. So if anybody wants to meet, get my contact information, let me know if you're in that area. And if you ever come to Supercrawl, feel free to reach out. I'd love to give people a tour or like take you around. So as far as Teardown, it's a massive endeavor. That's another thing that, you can't always rely on volunteers to do and help with. So we have a very small staff, obviously, that's there until, the bitter end, cleaning everything up. Art installations, I think the question was about specifically.
It
Was it
was
vendors?
disposing, artists responsible to move and dispose of their installations.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are.
They are, unless some of them honestly just like want it disposed of or don't care where it goes after. We've taken like large mural pieces that they don't want. So if they communicate with us beforehand or they don't have the ability to get a large scale piece off the street, we do help with that sometimes, but otherwise, kind of the standard is that they remove it themselves.
It is running late. Somebody wanted to know about your sponsorship strategy. I think that's another session, Nora. Um,
You can share
can they
my email. I can provide information to.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And Laura says, thanks for your presentation. I look forward to seeing people at the conference next week. Have a great weekend, safe travels. And Will says, thank you very much. Very informative presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, so much for doing this. Thanks, Jay, for being in the background. And Nora, thank you for hosting us. And don't forget when you log out that there's a survey on this session. So I'm
Thank
done.
you.
Nora, anything else?
No, I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Lots of really great concrete examples, which I think is really helpful for people who are in the thick of planning all of these types of events. So thank you so much for that.